The visitors at the end. He had made up his mind. There was no drama in it. No letter, no note, only quiet, and a stillness that had taken months to grow roots. The man sat alone, his jacket pulled tight against the wind, a rusted thermos of cold coffee at his side. The road behind him was gravel. The road ahead, fog, the sort of fog that swallows sound, where even the stars forget how to shine. He wasn't young, wasn't old. He had simply lost the thread. 1,000 small things had slipped out of his hands until it seemed he held nothing at all. It was not sadness that brought him here. It was the absence of anything else. The cabin was empty, once a friend's place, now long forgotten. Just walls, a wooden chair, a clock that had long since given up. He looked around the room and nodded once to himself. This would do, not because it was fitting, but because nothing else had. He sat down and closed his eyes. Not to sleep, just to stop. That's when he heard it. A sound too soft to be real. Like wind, but not wind. A hush, but not silence. And then, the faintest light from the corner of the room, pale. Blue, like memory. At first he thought he was dreaming or hallucinating. He rubbed his eyes, but the light didn't move. It held still, like it was waiting. And from within that soft blue glow, a figure began to take shape. Not fully human, not fully anything, just presence. Not cold, not bright, just there. "Who are you?" he asked. But the figure didn't speak. It didn't need to. He didn't feel afraid, not even surprised. Just noticed. Like someone had finally found the part of him that had been buried for too long. The figure raised one hand and slowly, gently, motioned toward the door. Not commanding, not pleading, just inviting. The man hesitated. He had planned to go nowhere ever again. But somehow this was different, so he stood and followed. Outside, the night air smelled of pine and far-off rain. The figure floated just ahead, not touching the ground, but somehow rooted in the world. They passed trees he didn't remember planting. Lights in the distance that looked like memories he'd forgotten he had. The wind carried whispers, but not in words. They were more like feelings he hadn't felt in years. They walked without destination. No questions asked, no answers needed. Just a man, and the first warmth he'd known in what felt like lifetimes. After a while, they reached a field lit only by starlight. In the middle of that field stood a bench. Old, weathered, waiting. The figure gestured for him to sit. He did, and together they looked at the sky. In that stillness, the man didn't speak, and neither did the figure. But something shifted. Not much, just a breath, just a heartbeat, a moment where the ache was not quite so heavy. Perhaps you feel it too as you rest now, a softening around your chest or in your breath. Something loosening, ever so slightly, something opening. The man sat in silence until he noticed the figure had vanished. Only the bench remained, and a small token, a single feather, blue-white, resting on the wood. He picked it up, held it in his hand, felt its weightless truth. The road was still foggy, the cabin still cold, but something had changed, and though he didn't know what yet, he stood, turned, and began to walk back, not to the end, but to the beginning of something else. Tomorrow waits, even when we don't. He awoke in the cabin, though he wasn't quite sure if he had ever fallen asleep. The feather was still in his hand, lighter than breath, cool against his skin. The light through the window was dim and strange, the kind of light that doesn't belong to any time of day. It filled the room like the hush before snow. He stood again, this time with less hesitation, and once more the silence began to hum, a soft thrum, like distant singing or a string being tuned far away. The walls of the cabin shimmered, and without fanfare a new figure stood at the threshold. This one felt different. Where the first had been stillness, this one was warmth. There was a smile in the air, though no mouth moved. A familiarity, as if someone had remembered a name he didn't know he had. The visitor was cloaked in colors that shifted like oil on water, and when they spoke, their voice was not loud, but it filled the room like light. "You left more behind than you know," they said, and with that, the walls of the cabin fell away. Suddenly, he was standing in the hallway of a school he hadn't visited in years. He recognized it, the chipped tile, the dusty windows, the faint echo of laughter through the closed doors. And there, walking toward him, was a boy, 10, maybe 11, carrying a crumpled drawing and a look of failure pressed into his small shoulders. The man gasped. He remembered. It was a day like any other. He had been tired, distracted, and the boy had handed him a picture of a rocket ship drawn in broken crayon lines. The man had looked at it, smiled, said, "You could build one of those someday." That was all. A small sentence forgotten by evening. But now, from the corner of the hallway, they both watched the boy stop walking. His shoulders lifted, his breath changed, and he turned, just for a moment, and smiled in the direction of a future he hadn't given up on yet. "That boy became an engineer," the visitor whispered. "He still remembers the man who believed in him for 6.5 seconds. The hallway faded. The man blinked. Now they stood in the corner of a quiet street. A storm was just beginning. Wind lifted leaves like secrets. And there, under a street lamp, sat a woman with a torn grocery bag and tears she didn't want anyone to see. He remembered her too. He had offered a ride, nothing more. She had said no at first, but he had waited. Then, she had said yes. They watched together as the woman stepped into his car all those years ago. She didn't say much, but the visitor's voice came again. She told no one, but that night, she had been planning her own end. Your presence shifted something. The ride, the quiet, the way you didn't push. It gave her one more day, and she made the most of it. The scene faded again. The man was silent now. Tears moved slowly down his face. He didn't remember doing anything great. He still didn't. And yet, the visitor had more. A garden, a quiet dog park, an old man in a hospital bed who had laughed for the first time in weeks when the man had told a bad joke about soup. "You thought you left no mark," the visitor said, "but the world remembers you in ways you cannot imagine. In strangers' healing, in laughter, in a child's belief that they were seen." The cabin returned but felt softer now. The man sat. He didn't speak, didn't have to. He looked at his hands, the same hands he had nearly used to end everything, and now he saw them differently. The visitor smiled again, stepped backward into the light, and with them, the warmth faded like the end of a lullaby. Outside, the fog had not lifted, but the man's steps felt steadier when he rose, as if somehow the world was beginning to unfold again. Tomorrow still waited, but so did something else, and for the first time in a long time, he was willing to find out what. It was still dark, though the quality of that darkness had changed. Not emptiness, not despair, just night. And for the first time in a long time, the man wasn't afraid of it. He sat quietly in the cabin, the old wooden chair creaking beneath him, the feather still held between thumb and finger. It had bent slightly now, its edge frayed, a reminder that even delicate things can be held too tightly. He didn't notice when the third visitor arrived. There was no shimmer this time, no strange light, just a shift in the air as though someone else was now breathing in the same room. The figure stood near the fireplace, though no fire burned. Their form was nearly human, older perhaps, familiar, though the man couldn't say why. This visitor did not speak. They only watched him, and then slowly they sat across from him. Not like a stranger, like a friend who had been here many times before. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was kind. It held no judgment, no pity, no waiting, only presence. And somehow the man felt that this visitor wasn't here to show him anything. They were here to be with him. They sat that way for a long time. Time itself felt strange, as if it had stopped keeping score. He didn't cry, didn't ask anything, didn't confess. And yet, he felt more understood than he ever had with words. The visitor leaned forward at one point and held out their hands. The man hesitated and then gave them his own. Warm, not glowing, not godlike, just human. And through that single act of contact, he felt it. The possibility of more days. Not better ones, not guaranteed, but more. More sunrises, more coffee cups, more long silences. That might one day mean something. The visitor reached into the pocket of their coat and placed something on the table. A key, rusty, old, still warm from their hand. No explanation was given, none was needed. The visitor stood, nodded once, then turned toward the door. But before leaving, they placed a hand gently on the man's shoulder. It lingered just long enough to be remembered. Then they were gone. No flash, no smoke. Just the slow hush of something sacred departing without need for applause. The man sat a while longer, not waiting, just resting. And when morning finally came, he rose. He stepped out of the cabin into a pale grey dawn. The fog was still there, but thinner now, and through it he could see something new. A gate, just off the road, and beyond it, a house he didn't recognize, yet somehow he did. He looked at the key in his hand. It fit the shape of his life exactly. He didn't smile, not yet. But his shoulders lifted slightly, as if the day might be worth meeting after all. And he walked. Not back to what had been, but forward, to something still unwritten. Sometimes we don't need rescue, just reminder that we are not forgotten, that we are not finished, that even in silence, we are heard. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking and sharing this video. Clicking the subscribe button will help my channel grow. Thank you for listening.